everybody. First off, wanted to start off with a little bit of gratitude, if you don't mind. So wanted to thank you all for joining this summit. I'm just amazed at how many people are here, all of the great conversations we've been able to have. Also wanted to thank the organizers as well as the volunteers. Can we get a round of applause for everybody? Thank you for that. It's been amazing work that they've done. And then I also wanted to thank all of our esteemed panelists here for taking their time. So thank you all. We'll give them a round of applause towards the end. Or we can do it now. We'll do it now and the end. Go for it. Okay, perfect. So welcome to the TPM evolution, adapting to change and the embracing the AI in the next era. I'm your host, Aman Bawa. I've been at TPM for about 25 years now, so I'm probably one of the older people in the room, and have seen great change in everything we've been doing and a constant evolution. And also in my day-to-day world, I work with AI models and the like, and been using them to revolutionize how we do marketing within Salesforce. And so very excited to be your host here. With that, I wanted to have the panel introduce themselves, but I'll ask them to introduce themselves and answer a question as well. And so as you're introducing, if you don't mind talking about the fact that AI is transforming many industries, including technical program management. And how do you incorporate AI in your daily work, whether it's managing programs, streamlining workflows, or decision-making? And could you share specific examples of the tools, processes, anything that's been benefited from AI? And we'll start with Kevin.
Hi, my name is Kevin. I am a TPM at Waymo. I manage the simulation and evaluation group and technical infrastructure and dev infra for Waymo. It is a very fun space. How many of you have taken Waymo? Oh, look at that. Those who haven't, please take a Waymo. It's a magical experience. You'll love it. Right? Speaking of AI, AI used to be action items, not artificial intelligence for all of us here at TPMs, right? So I want to talk a little bit about how AI is being used and how we do our work day to day. I don't think there is one consolidated tool for us, right? If you think across the board, how many of you here use AI for your day-to-day technical program management, right? Okay, a couple of hands here and there, not really across the board yet. So a lot of it is very situational, very specific at this point in time. If you think about what AI can do, there are three things, right? The speed and efficiency of how it consumes data, way better than a human. Two, the way the system makes hypotheses about data and how you can personalize data at the end of the day, number three, right? So these three things combined it gives you a really powerful tool to do program management at the end of the day. And our jobs at the end of the day circles around four things. One, managing the scope, managing the timeline, thinking about resources, and thinking about the quality of the work that comes out of it, right? So take that and then blend it into how you manage your day-to-day. For me, I use very specific tools for very specific things. In AI, there's a term called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. So what you really do is you have a lot of data available, and what the system can do really well is read everything really fast and then come up with stuff for you at the end of the day that's very specific to what you need to do. So for me, at least from a tool point of view, I find ways to help me at least optimize all those stuff. Now, all of us also have talked about strategy versus tactical work, right? Now, we want to do more strategic work, so AI would be good for doing all the tactical stuff. Imagine a day when you can generate data, create slides, bug an engineer, a product manager to give you a status update, or even build that all for you through a prompt. I think we're going to head there someday. We're just not there yet because the tools are not consolidated. So that's how I see how we would use AI and tools for program management in the future.
Hi, everyone. My name is Priya Sethuraman. I recently moved to NVIDIA. It's week 3. Prior to that, I was at Autodesk and Meta prior. I've been at TPM for about 7 years now and moved from engineering. It took me a little while to actually figure out what this function is and how to be successful in it. I hope I've cracked the code, but I keep learning. I think coming to AI, I've actually been working in AI infrastructure for the last 6 years, I think, prior to sort of AI blowing up the way it has been. But interestingly, I am not a new technology adopter. So I'm a very first principles person. So for me, I try to minimize problems. I mostly use my mind for that and less of actually technology. I do agree that we will eventually shift left so that, a lot of the sort of the program management aspects, some of the human toil, can go away with AI so that, some of the things that we have to do in order to actually get our work done and be more strategic can become AI enabled. But I actually very strongly believe in simplifying a problem so that you can understand where a human such as yourself can add the most value. So I feel like the more AI tools are out there, I spend actually more time figuring out how I am more valuable, if that actually makes sense. So.
I'm Kenny. I'm a TPM at OpenAI. I was at Facebook for a couple of years, and I went to become the first TPM at Sigma Computing. It's a data analytics tool. And I think the way I use AI isn't necessarily on the operational front or any of that stuff. It's more so like research. And for example, I think a lot of AI infrastructure is relatively new to the industry. So for me, it's mostly about, okay, like as we go global, as we go like distribute like our loads and workloads differently, right? It's like, what ideas can we kind of have? And I use chat, for example, as a means of like discussing new ideas and trying to figure out like, is this viable or not? Why or why not? What about this idea? Why or why not, right? So, and because like we're such a fast-moving company, it's like things change every day, right? Like one day we're just gonna say, hey, we really want to switch everything to research really quickly. And it's like, okay, well, there goes our roadmap, right? So because everything kind of switches every day, like there's no point for us to really like embed ourselves in the tooling aspect of things. Like everything's on spreadsheets still, right? It's very manual. And I don't think we're gonna get away from that anytime soon, to be honest. But as far as like TPM and AI kind of goes, I think TPMs are really good at like the technical aspect of things where we go really deep into a specific domain area or problem space. We try to master it the best we can, and then we solve it maybe to 70%, and then we pass the rest of the 30% off to like a tech lead or something like that, and then we move on to the next big problem, right? So I think in my time at OpenAI, I've been here for about like 9 months. I've worked on like 4 or 5 different like large scale programs already. And it's because like we just go in really, really deep. We figure out the 70%, we move on. And that's kind of how like AI would facilitate that like onboarding process anyways.
Hello, everyone. My name is Harman. I am a TPM leader at McAfee. I've been in the industry for over 20 years doing technology from Texas Instruments to Amazon, Airbnb, Uber, and now McAfee. For me, when it comes to AI, I believe my usage is a lot more in this room, limited, is how I'll put it. Am I proud of it? No, I want to use more and become more effective and efficient. But at this stage, I would say how I use AI is more for productivity, writing effectively, right? Like throwing in my points and getting a good output and polished output, so I don't have to keep refining it on my own, so move things faster. A good way for us to be at a level playing field with everyone else who can write well inherently. Second, I would say is like ideas, brainstorming, structuring ideas. If you have a lot of things going on, throw your points into ChatGPT or similar tools, ask it to structure for you, a good starting point. Yesterday, someone asked me, what is a good PDP process? I was tempted to go to TPM Slack workspace, ask this question there. Someone has something handy to give it to me. Let me try ChatGPT. I asked it, it gave me something I did not like, I changed my prompts, got something. Within 15, 20 minutes, I wrote in a spreadsheet a few phases, key activities, exit criteria, threw it for the workshop that I'll do next week with a few people to build upon it. So it's all about saving time, productivity at this point in time. And the next big use I'm trying to do is our roadmap operations tools, or where you have your status updates. We're trying to centralize that within one tool. They have some co-pilots. So co-pilot is the next thing which I may try and see how it goes. So if someone has any ideas around using co-pilots for status summaries or bubbling project summaries up to a portfolio level, happy to learn those. And that's where, as Kevin and others said, right, in program management world, it's all about efficiency, timing, moving faster, sharing the information in a better way is how we are going to use, at least in this phase. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks to all of you for that. Let's go into individual questions. So the first one will be for Kenny. Kenny, AI ML deployments often come with high stakes, both in terms of technically as well as strategically. Can you share some of the most critical programs you've run in this space? How have you balanced the tension between the technical feasibility and the business objectives? And what steps did you do to ensure the deployment?
So my manager's team, we manage all of like inference compute. So we work on all the major deployments, like speech just came out, Canvas came out yesterday, and like we did O1 reasoning 2 weeks ago, right? And I think like when you think about the technical constraints and the business constraints, like it's very straightforward for every program, in my opinion. It's like, what are the technical constraints kind of look like? What's the system look like? What's the architecture kind of look like? What's the infrastructure look like, right? And these are very straightforward in the land of like AI, which is like GPUs, right? Like we have a limited amount of GPUs. They're not distributed necessarily globally. It's not like CPU where it's like an application workload that you can like load balance really easily, because they only exist in specific pockets and areas where there's like space and power. So these are like physical infrastructural things that we need to understand, right? And then there's a business aspect, which is like, what type of like experience we want to give our user, right? And like for something like O1 reasoning, it might be okay for like answers to take a little bit longer, but then something like speech-to-speech where you're expecting to talk to someone in real time, latency might matter a lot more, right? So when teams kind of approach like us, when they kind of want to deploy things, we pretty much have to ask them like, what type of experience do you really want to give your users, and then why, and then what are your constraints, and then why, and you push them why, did you load test, why, right? And then you eventually get to a pretty good answer where it's like, okay, well, now we have two competing factors when we want to deploy on our very limited, constrained GPU fleet, and then you let them kind of duke it out, right? And then it goes up to like VP level and C-suite level, and then Sam might go out and say, yeah, you know, we really want to prioritize speech-to-speech, right? We want to make that the best experience possible. So then it's like, okay, well, we know where most of the users are, and you kind of make that trade-off and say, you know, well, do we really want to optimize for West or East when someone in Asia, like, what are we going to cut off, like 10 milliseconds off of 1 second latency time? Like, doesn't make sense either, right? So, like, I think having those types of discussions to pretty much, like, weigh the benefits and the pros and cons of, like, what's the actual bin packing look like? What's the actual work and effort it takes to actually implement this for your 10 millisecond cutoff latency? Then it's like, it's kind of pointless, too much effort. So then those are the type of discussions that we kind of have in order for us to like manage those types of deployments, right? Because we do live in a constrained GPU fleet for the entire world for the most part. So I think everyone's operating on the same model for these types of things.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Kenny. Next question for you, Priya. Building and leading generative AI teams presents unique challenges compared to other AI domains. How have you approached assembling and leading these teams? What specific obstacles have you run into? And how have you encountered areas such as talent acquisition, model development, and ethical concerns?
Yes, so generative AI is unique in the sense that it almost always means scale. Right? I think that's the primary thing that probably matters for people working in the space who are new to that space. And it's just bigger in terms of, much bigger in terms of the infrastructure that's needed across various dimensions, storage, compute, and network. And it can also be much bigger in terms of the surface area that's consuming it. And what does that mean? That means in terms of the diversity of use cases and models. And depending on the diversity of the models, you will have diversity in the infrastructure. So that's where I think a lot of the complexity comes in, especially from understanding the space in a technical way. So I don't think that you need to have been born in the Gen AI world in order to work in that world. I think it's the same sort of, you apply the same concepts of like systems level understanding, right? If you've worked in infrastructure, then infrastructure scaling. So I think from that perspective, I think you can look at it as a new workload that's just sort of a new complex, interesting workload. In a couple of years, it'll be like, we'll talk about it like how we talk about databases, now. So it's kind of, it's just new and interesting and different. So in terms of the talent, right? I think certainly, considering the fact that AI in general combines data, compute, network together is slightly different from the ways in which we segment a lot of other workloads that we tackle. So when you look for people to work in this area, ideally someone who can span the stack is useful, right? So even when Kenny talked, right, he talked about constraints. So understanding sort of constraints in an environment that has many different parts and intersections between those parts is very helpful. Understanding workloads and the way in which workloads use infrastructure and their constraints is very useful. So I think systems level thinking and sort of applying that to an evolving, diverse landscape is quite helpful. So I don't think you need to be an expert in one or the other thing, but being able to apply a lot of experience to scale in this new way is valuable.
Go ahead, Harman.
I'd like to add a couple of things here. Both Kenny and Priya touch a lot around infrastructure, workloads, compute. A lot of us here would probably be also working on the application side of AI, right? We'll have these fun models and everything like in reasonable space, but at the end, when you start building applications, more dedicated and focused applications, there'll be a lot of application-specific models, AI models that will come up. And from that lens, what I have started to see is we are all used to building stuff in English, be it UI, be it model, and launching stuff for US first, and then English-speaking countries, then local languages. And in the past, localization has been all about strings. But with this changing world with AI and model training, it's a very different play. People that have worked on things like Alexa or Siri and stuff would know. Application side and building models for different languages, it's not easy. There is accent bias, there is language bias, there is training needed. And all that needs equivalent amount of time that English needs. So as you embrace into this new world of building companies on top of generative AI and models, your life is going to be very different in terms of how you plan your projects, how you understand the end-to-end implementation workflows, and how you then get everything lined up in the right way. And if not, then you'll end up in a situation like me where I had to launch something for Germany. We were able to launch, but we were not able to launch it for UK because we used the German data, training data for English model, and we failed miserably on it, right? So that's something I wanted to add here.
Okay, thanks for that, Harman. Kevin, next question is for you. Driving innovation within AI, ML, and simulation teams for autonomous vehicles involves navigating both cutting-edge technology and complex challenges. What have been the most critical factors in fostering successful innovation in these teams? Can you speak to the role of cross-functional collaboration, overcoming technical hurdles, and cultivating a culture that encourages experimentation?
All right, you're going to hear me talk about self-driving quite a bit. I think at this point in time, it's a very exciting time in tech. I think all of us will remember probably the first time we've used OpenAI and how that really changed the way we looked at technology. Self-driving cars going through the same thing. You would say you got to be a bit crazy to drive a 2-ton car in a city like San Francisco without a driver, right? So we are now in an era of innovation where humans are not part in the loop, and we have systems and all these technology driving that for us, right? So the technology behind that is not easy, right? If you just visualize how hard it is to build a car that drives on its own in a very dense city, it is very difficult. Everything from the stack, from the bottom of the car driving on its own to the models and everything needs to work together, right? Love OpenAI, but Waymo's a little bit more complex. We don't have the luxury of making a mistake, right? If you put a prompt in and you make a mistake, that's okay. If the car sees the world wrongly and makes the wrong decision every single time it needs to inch forward, we're in trouble. So you can imagine the complexity that comes with that. And to manage that complexity, you can imagine the engineering teams behind it, the infrastructure teams behind it, the amount of data you have to put into whatever storage and train everything behind it, right? There's a lot of cross-functional work that needs to happen. Now, we've tried to draw the architecture from end to end, impossible, right? It's just that complex. So there's a lot of alignment that we have to do as TPMs, right? The one thing we forget as TPMs is essentially a leadership role. You as one TPM can go across organizations and really make a difference in that particular organization. Sometimes we sit in a room, we may say, ooh, I don't really know what they're talking about. They're speaking a foreign language, right? But we forget that TPMs actually know the most across the entire organization because we sit across the entire organization. So that's a superpower and skill that we have that hopefully AI doesn't take over, that we can use to leverage how TPMs can really make a difference in an organization, right? If you think about how engineering teams work together, a lot of them just care about their specific area, their specific focus, and stuff like that. So you, as the TPM, are essentially the translator between teams to find commonality between how everybody should talk to each other, right? You're basically the API between all the teams. So to really foster innovation, you have to go deep sometimes. You have to go wide. You may not be the smartest person in the room, and that's okay. I have my team here. My team is smarter than I am, as always. But you have the luxury of understanding and seeing everything across the board. So with that, you have the power to align teams at the end of the day. Now, TPMs are not just status checks, checking in on stuff, writing reports and stuff like that. A true TPM will not only know all of that, but have the ability to change the trajectory of the organization. That's our role, right? If you can change the trajectory of a team, you can change the trajectory of an organization, you can change the trajectory of a company, then you found yourself in a really great place as a TPM because you understand the entire stack from top to bottom. That's how I view innovation at the end of the day.
Kevin, does the API ever have a 500 response?
We can't do that. But yes, being a safety system, we have a lot of safety fallbacks, and that's typically how we manage risk and all that. So TPMs come in and we try to drive and lower all that risk.
Awesome, thank you, Kevin. Harman, next question is for you. In an ambiguous or rapidly evolving programs, defining and tracking the right metrics can be challenging. How do you approach setting meaningful metrics when the goals or outcomes are not always clear? And can you share strategies for measuring progress and ensuring alignment in these uncertain environments?
Sure. How many people in this room have ever been given a program and said, this is the KPI, get me from X to Y? Oh, lucky you. I have not been that lucky. Okay. We all have this problem when we have to run our programs, right? Metrics are unknown, it's ambiguous out there, it's a challenge what to do next, right? I have my Airbnb buddies here. They like this example that I'm going to share. When I started at Airbnb, they were on a multi-year journey from monolithic architecture to service-oriented architecture. Things were being changed in the core business logic when I started. They were developing both in monolith and service-oriented world, building services, moving front end, back end to that. Features were built at the same time. So they were building in both the tech stacks, old and new. Engineering leader could not really figure out when will this be done, right? When will we be back to single stack? When she can sign up for more features and move faster? So I joined. I'm asked, when will be this done, right? Now, when you have 40+ engineering teams across 7, 8 organizations, few hundred engineers, close to 1,000, migrating systems, there are infrastructure systems being built. How do you do that? How do you define when it will be done? One way is go ask every team, when are you done? Give me your dates. When we don't need to have you work in two systems, but then all those systems have tenants. Those tenants need to migrate. So you cannot really support the old system until the tenant is migrated. So in that scenario, my challenge was, how do I show some progress, show what is the percentage we are complete, how we are increasing the complete percentage month over month or week over week. Can I give them a path of saying within 6 months, within 1 year, or within 18 months, we'll be mostly done on major systems, that you can be back to single stack? So what I did was I spent time with engineering teams understanding what are the different flavors of building services and migrating tenants out of that. Came with 4 flavors. In those 4 flavors, I built various stages of it. In those stages, I decided, gave them weights on when you're done with the stage, what percentage you're done with your migration based on the effort estimate that they had for each of the stage, and made a general spreadsheet to say, where I had like 200 line items, different teams, different owners that would provide me updates every week of what stage is done, and based on the weightage, I started getting percentage complete for a service, for a migration, for a team, for an organization, and show them progress on a weekly basis, and then also coach them on how to tell me about their risk and challenges so that the tenants know about it. And tenant migration was included as part of the migration percentage calculation. So that way I was able to generate metrics, show progress, and show a path forward to completion. Now it sounds simple from the lens of that, yeah, people can tell you the data and you can figure out a path forward, but extracting information was tough across hundreds of engineers. So I had to also then build a good communication strategy around it, build a core team of people who would provide me those updates from combined 5, 6 services together in the form that I needed, in a lightweight system called Slack, communications versus doing a meeting every week for just gathering status that people hate, and I also hated that. So second part was, A, you build a system, B, you gather data, and C, report it to leadership effectively with risk and mitigation. So I would say, as we move into the new world with AI and the changes that are going to come, every time there will be ambiguity. You just need to understand your environment well around you, figure out some strategies that have worked for others in the past or you in the past, and start iterating on it, and you'll find a system where you will be able to leverage some metrics that already exist or create new where none exist, and then take it from there. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Harman. We'll do one more question from here, then we'll open it up to the audience, and if we have time, we'll go back to some questions we'd pre-prepared. Priya, transition, and it's a very timely question, I think, for you now. Transitioning between companies often brings unexpected challenges and opportunities, especially in leadership roles. What were some of the most surprising hurdles or opportunities you've encountered during these transitions, and how have you adapted your leadership style to fit the new environment?
That is a very timely question. I actually wore my herding the cats shirt today just to have fun with all the transitions that have been happening. So I think that a few things, right? So whenever you sort of change roles, like it's happened more often than I in the past for me. There can be like pretty large shifts in terms of your day to day, right? And a lot of those shifts are actually, I think, from the cultural aspects of where you go. It's the technology, and then the sort of the work itself you can figure out, but then how to operate and sort of working with the people, right, can be sort of the most interesting aspect, and I think sometimes something that we don't spend enough time on. So I think so some lessons learned for me have been when you join a place, find out what makes it tick. Right, like, so what sort of how do people work there? Do they, what are the systems, right? Is it very structured? Is it fairly unstructured? Is it fairly process oriented? Is it super loose? Is it very chaotic? Is it more organized? So I think there are lots of different dimensions around sort of how to work, and also people, right? Is it like, do you get your work done through people? Is it like more hierarchical? Is it bottoms up? I think those things are very, very, very important to figure out. And I think that has actually, and sometimes what you discover is fun, and sometimes it's not, right? Like it's not actually the way you want to work, but that's how you need to, right? So I think operating within some of the boundaries of what you cannot control has been an important lesson for me, and being effective, still keeping the eye on the prize, right? Like, making impact. How do you make impact? And the companies that I've worked in the last few times have been quite a bit different in sort of all these parameters. The other aspect is, what is leadership, right? I had been a manager for, I think, 15 years, and then my last 2 roles are IC roles. And I actually, I love it. And I've always sort of decided, like, and I think that is something I feel, and I don't know if many of you agree with me, but I think as a TPM, I think being able to toggle is actually very, very helpful. Keeping up with the technologies, keeping up with how things are done, like, so that you can be an effective individual leader and a team leader. So I think these 2 aspects, I think the cultural parts, and then being able to define yourself as a leader, being, as sort of an individual leader and a team leader, I think these are 2 things that have been helpful.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Priya. Kenny, why don't you go ahead?
I think I have a similar approach as well, but I tend to think about it in like 2 ways, which is like, don't rock the boat too soon. And then the second one is like, kind of go out, talk to all the senior ICs, everyone that you know, get the stack rank of problems, and then find the easiest problem that would probably have the highest impact, build credibility as fast as possible, and that's kind of how you build that trust over time.
Great point, Kenny. Right now, we only have about 3 minutes left, so I'll open it up. Are there any questions from the room? Anybody wants to ask? We've got one over here. The mic's not on?
Are you able? Oh, okay. I hear myself. Great talk. I'm Pallavi. My question was, feature development is changing with Gen AI. As TPM leaders, do you all see any opportunities for TPMs to proactively figure out an opportunity rather than being reactive? Because a lot of times that's what I've seen in companies. The program management role is more of a reactive, that, oh, we need someone, and they go higher. But just because the way we develop features, everything is changing with AI, are there any opportunities that we should proactively go after as program managers?
Any of our panelists want to take? Go for it.
The business changes every day, right? Like if new technology comes in, you always have to be ready to adapt to it. So I feel like it's almost like unavoidable at that point, right? And as far as like going and thinking more proactively about like, oh, how is Gen AI going to probably like impact my roadmap? You kind of just have to put on your product hat and like, how's it going to impact like my product? How's it going to impact everything I work on? Is it going to make it better, worse, right? And like, that's kind of like an intuitional thing. Like, I don't know if that's something like we can proactively chase after. There's a framework around that. It's just like, no, we have to use our best intuition, put on a product hat, and feel like, according to the problem space I'm currently working on, how is Gen AI going to impact it negatively, positively, make it more effective, easier? It doesn't matter what the case is, right?
One thing I'll add to it is invest time in understanding the evolving system. A lot of times what you find is features are not built in silos within one engineering team, but engineering teams operate mostly in that mindset. They start working on their area with disconnected systems built in other areas. So as TPM, you are connecting that layer and being the glue, as Kevin was mentioning, right? So new features, learning, understanding how things connect, and then you'll be able to proactively drive things versus always reacting to the problems that come unearthed along in the execution. You can get ahead of the game.
Okay, thanks for that, Harman. And we have one question remote. You have a mic? Use this one. Yeah.
So this is a question from David. I think Gen AI is pushing TPMs to be experts beyond the normal role expectations. For example, we're being asked to understand and define security, privacy, and governance models for Gen AI initiatives. How are you all handling this shift? Any resources that you find useful as you define Gen AI strategies?
You can ask chat.
Yeah, so I think I can take a stab at this. So I think these are all fairly uncharted territories in many cases in terms of what responsible AI means for the generative AI world. And I think that some of the sort of the more well-defined pillars within this are security, privacy, compliance, and governance, right? So, so I think these pillars they need to be applied to the generative AI products that you are building, but the principles behind them are the same, right? There are certain either government, global government-related regulations that software that we build needs to adhere to, that the data that we are using needs to comply to. So I think following those principles, I think where the challenge happens is moving fast while doing this, right? I think that is where I think we have to use some of our superpowers to say what are the non-negotiables and what, like, for example, that we have to do versus what is nice to have. And those can be very tricky in these domains, right? And but then I think a lot of it is also us pushing the boundaries in some sense in the companies where we are allowed to do that, right? Where you can question what the ethical implications of a particular technology are. I think we should do that, because there are a lot of regulations that are still not in place for this technology while we are building out more of the business and sort of monetary aspects of it. So that's just an area that I think that we can dive into. But in terms of data integrity, compliance, and governance, I think we can apply existing principles, but sort of moving super fast.
Thanks. Kevin?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'll just add something real quick to Priya's note. At the end of the day, TPMs, it's still a very personal role, right? You still have a lot of human interaction. As great as AI is, it's not going to take that over. Nobody's going to go around the organization and do the change management for you. No AI is going to do that as of today. So there's still a lot of human touch to this in our role. Yeah, probably it will augment our role and make us more efficient, maybe less TPMs, or we have to align with product or engineering, but we still have a human component to this that plays a big role in the organization, and I don't think that would go away.
Kenny, did you want to add? No. Oh, okay, great. So we're a little over on time, but I have one more question, if you all don't mind, that I wanted to ask Kenny, as I thought it would be pertinent to a lot of people in the room. So for TPMs that aren't currently in AI roles, but are interested in transitioning into the AI space, what are the best ways to gain exposure, gain exposure and build relevant skills? And how can they effectively prepare for interviews with getting specific knowledge and experience that they can focus and stand out?
I think there are 3 swim lanes, right? It's either like you're kind of already in the space and you kind of understand exactly the problem space that you're operating within, right? But then overall, though, like systems are pretty much the same everywhere. So let's say you're coming from a big company. Every big company, you probably understand like how operational things work, what good process looks like. You have great CI/CD, great dev infra, all these different things, right? And ideally, maybe if you go to like, and then there's the second company, which is like the small startup, hyperscaling, you go in, bad CI/CD, not a lot of testing, you don't have a lot of observability, whatever a case might be, right? So then AI companies are probably going to be in a latter bucket anyways. They're going to be growing. They're going from like 100 to 200, 300 people really, really quickly. And then you can only imagine the type of problems you're going to run into. They're very generic problems, right? Like everyone's going to have to run into scalability issues. Everyone's going to run into these types of issues, right? So if you're coming from a bigger company, just like kind of like keep in mind that like these are all the systems that make this company run very easily, so we can focus on more of the operational stuff, maybe the less technical stuff. But when you go to like a smaller company, right, like these are the things that you could kind of flex where it's like, I was at a smaller company, Sigma was 100 people, and then it became 400. So while building out those systems and all those like incident management processes and whatever, right, it's kind of like you know exactly what didn't work at a small company, you know exactly what did work at a big company, and you kind of go to your next gig kind of understanding the lay of the land, you stack rank, you prioritize everything, and you find a way to add value in different ways, right? So I think like there are many different ways to kind of get into it. You just have to understand like what value are you taking from your current experience, and then how do you jump on the train, right? Like whether it's like you're shoveling coal or you're just trying to hang on so you don't get kicked off the train, right? Like just find a way to add impact in some way.
Love this.
Great. Did anybody else want to add on to that? Quick check to the volunteers. We are at least 5 over. Can we keep going, or we got to wrap? Okay. So.
Not allowed.
Okay. So with that, I wanted to thank everybody. Can get a round of applause for our panel. Perfect.